If you feel like you're stuck in that pentatonic box and you're sick and tired of the sound of your existing licks, in this video we're going to look at 5 tips that will get you out of that pentatonic rut. We're going to be talking about using modes in this video, but not modes in the conventional sense that you'd see all the shred guys using when they're blazing through these 3-note per scale runs. We're going to be looking at modes in a pentatonic context. So I'm talking about this from my experience as a blues and rock player. So we're going to be looking at how I use modes, and I'll give you 5 tips that really help me kind of break out of that pentatonic box with modal notes. So if you look up information on the internet about how to learn modes, you'll see a ton of different information out there. The most conventional way to learn modes is to take your major scale, whatever key you're playing in. The first mode is the major scale itself. Then we restack that scale starting from each next note. So you start from the second note, that's your next mode, the third note, that's your third mode, and so on. We're not going to be doing that at all. We're going to be looking at modes in this video from what I like to think of as a slightly more useful or more of a practical sort of standpoint on modes. So the whole idea with this approach is to basically tie modes into your existing pentatonic shapes. So we're just going to use one shape of the major pentatonic and one shape of the minor pentatonic in this video. And we're going to talk about how you can integrate modal notes into that as a way of just adding a flavor or a coloration to your lick. So this isn't modes in the traditional sense. This is a little bit more of a blues or rock player's approach to modes. It's something that I think is a little bit more of an easy way to get started with modes, especially if you're more of the bluesy sort of rock orientation of a player. If you're someone who loves players like Leigh and Satriani and you just want to rip through those 3-note per scale runs, this probably isn't the approach for you. But if you're someone like me who is basically stuck in that classic pentatonic blues rock kind of style, these tips and tricks will help you just add a little bit more interest to your lead lines. This video is sponsored by my friends at ultimateguitar.com. So if you guys want to see all of the scale diagrams and all the information from this video written out in an article, that is linked down below over on the Ultimate Guitar website, so you can go check that out. All the stuff we talk about in this video is transcribed over there for you to check out. So before we do anything with modes, let's just first look at the pentatonic shapes that we're going to be using. So we already know our minor pentatonic scale, but I'm going to play this just for you now in A minor. That is just the first position of the minor pentatonic. I'm also going to be using the 5th position of the major pentatonic, and the reason for this is it's the same shape, which is going to be starting at the other side of the A note. So here it is in A major. I'm going to start it from the A here, which is the root. We could start it here from the 6, which is the F sharp, but I'm just going to start from the 1 for ease. Now the reason that I've chosen this shape of the major pentatonic is because we can play the same licks. So I can play minor licks or major licks, but the licks will form the same pattern because we're using the same pentatonic shape. This is the way that I like to approach modes as well. I like to base everything off that shape and then I can extend from there. All of the principles in this video are also applicable to any of the subsequent shapes of the scales as well. We're just going to talk about them in these shapes today because that's where I think the best place to start is. So the whole point of this video and the way you're going to be using this information isn't as a series of crazy modal scales all over the fretboard. It's simply just a list of tips and tricks to open up your pentatonic scales and give you some extra note choices. So just because we talk about these notes and we give those notes a context, it doesn't mean you have to use them every single time. These notes are simply just being highlighted for you to see what other options you have. So you could still be playing pentatonic, but the whole reason for this is to let you know which other notes are available to create certain sounds or flavors or add certain characteristics to the existing licks you're already playing. So instead of thinking of this as a brand new concept or something that's completely new to learn, think of this as an extension of something you already know. Each of the 5 tips I give you in this video is going to have a little section with me jamming these ideas over a backing track as well. I'm going to be changing key depending on which backing track I'm using, but like everything with scale theory, these concepts are applicable in any key, and we're going to let you know which key I'm playing it in as well. If you want the scale diagrams, like I said, they're all linked down below over on the Ultimate Guitar website, and all the detail and all the theory you need to accompany this video is also written out in a lot of detail, so go click that link and check that out as well. The tones you're hearing in this video are going to be from my PRS S2 Studio. This is plugged into the Blackstar Studio 10 6L6, which is running via the Torpedo Captor X from 2 Notes. The reverb you're hearing is coming from the Surfy Industries Surfy Bear Classic, and the drive you're hearing in the video is going to be coming from the Wampler gearbox. I'm using both the Klon side and the Marshall in a box side at different points in this video, so all the drive tones are coming from that pedal. Tip number 1 is to use the Dorian mode to mix major and minor sounding ideas over a blues progression. So let's say you've got a blues progression that's made up of dominant 7 chords. This is quite common in blues music. A dominant 7 chord is interesting because it contains a flat 7 interval, which we predominantly think of as being a minor sounding interval, but it also contains a major third. So a dominant 7 sort of sits in this middle ground between major and minor. It doesn't really conform to either of the two strictly. So we can kind of play with this idea of switching between major and minor over the top of it. But instead of needing to learn our major and minor pentatonics, which is useful by the way, you should do that, we could use the Dorian mode as an extension of the minor pentatonic scale. Now the Dorian mode is essentially a minor mode. It has a minor third, it behaves like a minor tonality mode, but it has a very interesting additional note, which is the major 6. So if we play an A minor pentatonic, the intervals for this are 1, flat 3, 4, 5, and flat 7. And then obviously those are repeated. For this, we're going to add some extra notes into this. So we're going to be adding the 2, which is a B note. And we're also going to be adding the major 6, which is this F sharp note. We're also going to be adding those 2 notes higher up the scale. So the major 6 is also going to appear here. And the 2 is going to appear here. So it's our minor pentatonic with a B note and an F sharp note, which are also added here, which is F sharp and B. So that gives us us 2 different options within the scale. At the top of the scale especially, we have what is our usual minor pentatonic shape, but we also have the addition of this major 6 here and the 2 here, which gives us this sort of major pentatonic box. This is where this gets interesting because we can be playing minor licks and we can add those little major twists to the licks. It's a really interesting scale for playing over a 12-bar blues that is based around dominant 7 chords. In a moment you're going to see me playing over a backing track which is a 12-bar blues based around dominant 7 chords. I'm going to be using a combination of minor pentatonic and Dorian notes. You'll see it flash up on the screen when I'm playing just pentatonic, and you'll see it flash up on the screen when I'm adding the modal notes. You'll notice that I'm not going to be changing up too much. I'm going to be using those modal notes to enhance what I'm already playing or to create a different feel with what I'm playing. Tip number 2 is using the Aeolian mode to create some Jimmy Page style sounds. So the Aeolian mode is a really great mode for anyone starting out with modes. This is probably the first mode you should use if you're just going to be playing things that have a very minor sort of sound or feel. The reason this is a great one to use is the Aeolian mode is a mode that is otherwise known as the natural minor scale. And what that means is this is basically just the minor scale. So we're going to be taking our pentatonic once more, and we're going to be adding 2 notes to this. So once again going to be adding the 2, which in this case is the B note, and this time we're going to add a note called a flat 6. So in the Dorian mode we added the F sharp note, which we said was the major 6. The flat 6 is just the F sharp note flattened a semitone down to an F. But instead of playing that on the 3rd fret of the D, I'm going to move that to the 8th fret of the A string. And then obviously we're going to repeat those at the higher end of the scale. So the F is going to be here on the 6th fret of the B. And the B is once again at the 7th fret of the E. So that gives us... The note of interest, in my opinion, in this one is that flat 6. This is the note that Jimmy Page uses quite a lot to create a very interesting sound in his lead lines. 2 great examples of that are the first lick from Stairway to Heaven. That lick starts off looking like minor pentatonic, but he lands on an F note at the end. So it's A minor pentatonic, but the closing note is an F. Now, where we would typically take that lick if we were playing pentatonic would be to this E note on the 7th fret, which would be correct for a pentatonic player, but Page just hangs it out on that F. That flat 6 just gives it a little bit of a twist. The other place he uses this is in the intro for the Led Zeppelin track, Since I've Been Loving You. This is one of my favourite Page licks, and it's actually in C minor, this one, so I'm just coming up here to the 8th fret position. So there's that first little turn there where he just brushes through that note there on the 10th fret, which is the D. That's the 2nd in the scale. And then he really emphasises that flat 6 there, which in this case is a G sharp. The flat 6 is a great note to add to any blues licks if you want to get that Jimmy Page sort of vibe. It's just a note that is slightly outside of what we usually expect for pentatonic. It's a semitone higher than the 5th. We always think of the 5th as being a great resolution note, but landing on the 6 just kind of creates this feeling of tension. It's a semitone higher than the 5th, so we don't get that perfect resolution, but we do get this nice note that just sort of piques our interest. Even if you just hang on it for a moment, it's a really interesting note to throw in. So here's a clip now of me jamming over a backing track, which is going to be a C minor 12-bar blues. I'm going to be throwing in those Aeolian notes, and you'll see the pop up on the screen when I do. Third tip is to use the Phrygian mode to add a little bit of 80s heavy metal flavour to your lead lines. So the Phrygian mode is very typically associated with bands like Iron Maiden and Metallica, so if you're into that 80s classic heavy metal or early thrash metal thing, the Phrygian mode is a great one. So for this one, this is also a very minor leaning mode. This has some very interesting intervals in there, which can be quite tricky to use at first, and these are slightly harder to use over a blues context, but they can be used. But if you really want to get the most out of these, putting them over a rock track or even an early 80s metal style track is a great way to get some mileage out of these notes. So we're once again taking our pentatonic, and we're adding a couple of new intervals to that. So the first interval we're adding is the flat 2. So whatever key we're playing this in, so I'm playing this in A, my flat 2 is a semitone above the root. So in that case it's going to be a B flat. My third, or my flat third, is still there as always. The other note I'm adding is the flat 6, which we just talked about from the Aeolian mode. So think of this like the natural minor scale of the Aeolian mode with the 2 flattened. So it's 1 flat 2 and flat 3, and then 4, 5 flat 6 and flat 7. So in this case we're just taking a pentatonic scale and we're adding B flat and F. And we're also going to add those notes in a couple of other positions. So we've also got a B flat here on the 8th fret of the D string. We're also adding an F note on the 6th fret of the B. And we're also adding a B flat on the 6th fret of the E. So altogether that gives us... Some of those closer intervals in this scale are really useful for creating an Eastern or slightly flamenco Spanish kind of sound. The reason this is associated with bands like Iron Maiden and Metallica is that slightly Eastern influence this scale has. It's the relationship between the 1 and the flat 2 and the 5 and the flat 6. We've got those very close semitone movements. The sound we typically associate with Phrygian is this sort of Eastern flamenco type sound. You may hear something like this from the bands that use it. So I'm going to show you this now in context over a backing track. This backing track is going to be in the key of E minor, so I'm going to be playing the Phrygian mode rooted at the 12th fret. So think of this like an E minor pentatonic with a B flat and an F added. Tip number 4 is making your major pentatonic solos a little bit more melodic with the Ionian mode. So we're going major key for this one. We're going to be using the major pentatonic I showed you there at the 5th fret. Now this major pentatonic shape is great as an introduction to major pentatonic playing, and you probably already know this by now. The reason it's great is because it shares the same shape as the minor pentatonic, but it's just mirrored the other side of the root note. This means we can play all our usual pentatonic licks, but in a major feeling sound. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add some extra notes to that to make this major. This is going to be the Ionian mode. The Ionian mode is also known as the major scale. Now when we first learn guitar, we always learn the major scale like this. But now we're going to play that same scale but revoiced to fit into that 5th shape major pentatonic scale. So the intervals of the major pentatonic are 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. So to make our major pentatonic into the Ionian mode, we're just going to be adding 2 intervals to the ones we've already got. So we've already said we've got the 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. So we need to add the 4 and the 7. So in this key, which is A major, the 1, 2, 3 is A, B, C sharp, and the 5 and 6 is E and F sharp. Now the notes I need to add in this case are going to be D and G sharp. So I'm going to add those at the 5th fret of the A, which is my D note, and the 1st fret of the G, which is my G sharp. I've also got a D here at the 3rd of the B, and a G sharp here on the 4th of the E. Now when I play this, you'll instantly recognize the shape as being the same as the Aeolian mode. This is because this is the parallel opposite. So we've got the minor scale, the natural minor, which is the Aeolian, and the Ionian, which is the major scale. Like the minor and major pentatonics work this way, the Aeolian and Ionian mode are actually opposites of each other as well. So we can take that same shape and we can root it here from this A note. We could add this G sharp and this F sharp if we wanted to. It would look like F sharp minor. That is because F sharp minor as a key shares the same 7 notes as A major. We're going to ignore those 2 notes for now though. We're going to start from the A, but this shape is going to resemble that of the Aeolian mode, just played this side of the A note. So you could think of this scale as being like a major version of the Jimmy Page thing we talked about. You've got the 2 additional intervals in this scale. Even though the shape is the same, the intervals that fall on those notes are different because we're now talking in major. When we talked about this as a minor mode, we talked about that flat 6 as being the note of interest. In this scale, as a major version of the mode, I think the note of interest is the 4, which is this D note. This is a note that gives the scale a nice melodic quality, especially if you're landing on the D chord. For instance, if I'm playing an A major and there's a D chord, I can land on that note at the end of a lick and it will sound really melodic. The 7, the G sharp in this case, is also an interesting note because that note in a major context is a major 7. Now a major chord does not have a major 7 note present. A major 7 chord does. Now this is interesting because this note kind of gives it a slightly jazzy quality. I do personally find that the major 7 is a note that I don't use too much in my own melodic soloing, but it's nice to hit the note and then take it to somewhere else. So now we're going to look at the Ionian mode in action over a backing track. I'm going to play this in the key of E major, so I'm taking that Ionian shape and rooting it from the 12th fret of the low E string. The 5th and final tip I'm going to give you in this video is adding a minor feel to major licks using the Mixolydian mode. So the Mixolydian mode is another variation on the major scale, so we can think of this as a major pentatonic or a major scale with some alterations. This time though, we're going to be incorporating a new note which makes this feel slightly more minor, even though the overall scale is going to have a major feel. Like the Dorian is a minor scale with a major feel, this is going to be the polar opposite. So we're going to be playing major ideas, but with a single note that just gives us a little pull towards a minor feel. So we're once again starting from the A major pentatonic. This time we're just going to be substituting the major 7 that we talked about in the Ionian mode for a flat 7. So that in this case is going to be the G sharp note flattened to a G. So the whole scale is going to be A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G, so there's that flat 7, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G, A. Now you may recognize the finger pattern of this one as being the same as the Phrygian mode. You could also think of this as your Aeolian mode with a flat 7. This is a great one because it overall has that major feel, but the flat 7 note, which is that G note, will give us a minor feeling note. So if I'm playing major licks, so it's only one note, and you can't really get away with hanging on it too long over a major progression because it does become a little bit dissonant if you hang on it for too long, but it's a great note choice just to throw in and out. Now remember, like with all these tips and tricks, these notes aren't there to be used all the time, they're just flavors and colorations you can add to your playing. So now I'm going to play over an A major backing track, and I'm going to throw in that flat 7, and we're going to see how it sounds. The final thing I want to add to this list, this isn't really a tip as such, but it's more of a concept to apply to these tips. Just because you're thinking in one particular mode doesn't mean you're governed by that one mode. Now what I mean by that is, if we think of pentatonic, we think of playing within the realms of the pentatonic scale, we can actually mix and match the additional modal notes that we've added to create different textures and different sounds. Just because you've added a Dorian note to a minor pentatonic, it doesn't mean you can't add a Phrygian note. A great example of this at work is there's a lick at the start of the Stevie Ray Vaughan song Texas Flood, which goes like this. It's in G minor, it looks like G minor pentatonic. So the lick actually starts off looking like a minor pentatonic lick. Then it does this Dorian note, then a Phrygian note, then back to pentatonic. So we can actually use all of these concepts combined as long as they fit the tonality of the piece. So if you're playing over a minor key piece, you can mix notes from the Aeolian, the Phrygian and the Dorian scale to create different textures. And likewise, if you're playing major, you can mix Ionian with Mixolydian. There are two modes in this video we haven't talked about, and that is by design. That's the Lydian mode and the Locrian mode. Now the Lydian mode is a major mode with a sharp 4. This is quite an awkward interval to use. It does give it a slightly augmented or diminished feel. It's better suited for players like Steve Vai or people who play more jazzy styles of music. It's a pretty hard note to fit into rock and blues, so for me personally, I always give that scale a bit of a miss. And the other one is the Locrian mode. This is a mode that is very heavily centered around a diminished sound, which again, we're probably not going to use too much for rock and blues playing, so if you don't need it, don't worry about it too much. Those are two modes that I never use, but the other 5 in this lesson I think are great ways to extend your existing pentatonic licks with some new ideas. So there you go, there are my 5 tips and tricks to use modal notes to help you break out of pentatonic boxes. Don't forget to check out all the scale diagrams and further information about all of this down below in the description on the ultimateguitar.com website. There's a link in the description to the article where you can see all this stuff mapped out for you as well. There is a bunch of information about these scales and the theory that goes with these scales over on my guitar course as well, which is also linked down below in the description. So if you want to dig into more detail, hit that link. There's currently a 7-day free trial. Let me know down below in the comments how you've gotten on with all of these concepts, which your favorite mode is for breaking out of the pentatonic box. And if you have your own favorite tip or method for breaking out of the pentatonic box, throw that below as well, because I'd love to hear what you guys are doing to break out of that rut. Don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button if you did enjoy this video, and feel free to share it with your friends if you enjoyed it and you think there's something there they can learn from as well. Thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you guys very soon.